What if I told you that everything you believed about progress is not true? We are used to thinking of modern technology as the pinnacle of comfort, but for some reason our smart heating systems need to be replaced every 10 years. At the same time, in the cold stone castles of Europe, there are fireplaces and chimneys that are still functioning after half a millennium without a single repair. Watch the video to the end, and you will learn how the seemingly primitive technologies of the past surpassed modern engineering in one key indicator: the ability to survive. Are you ready to learn the truth about why your walls are cold, but castle walls are not? The secret of medieval heating was in the ability to work with mass, time, and the simplest laws of heat. People back then did not hope for quick heating. They believed in slow accumulation and long-term returns. For them, heat was not a flash in the pan, but a long process that warmed everyone, not just the air. That is why stone halls could be a place of life in winter rather than a source of damp cold. Modern radiators rely on thin metal that reacts to the supply of energy almost instantly. It heats up, cools down, reminds you of itself, and then falls silent. This is convenient in fast cycles, but such technology does not retain heat for long and requires a constant external power supply. Medieval craftsmen saw the task differently. A house should be a thermal fortress that stores and releases heat on its own until the foundation is broken. Such warmth cannot be achieved without material, and they were not afraid of this. In medieval castles, the fireplace was not just a bonfire, but a starting point for heating a huge thermal mass, most often stone. The walls, floor slabs, and even the central supports of the hall were heated by a fire that could burn from morning to night. The heat was not confined to narrow details, but was poured into the surrounding structure. From the outside, it looked like a huge fire in a stone mouth. But for a Roman campaign in a medieval house, it was a state-of-the-art stove in terms of its autonomy. The house was heated for a long time because they knew that if you heat it quickly, you lose it quickly. The stone absorbed the heat continuously and over time, like a huge battery that is charged slowly. The lime mortar and the structure of the masonry itself allowed such cycles to be sustained without critical damage to the load-bearing base. The longer the stone received heat, the deeper it penetrated into the thickness of the wall. And the more massive the fireplace and its surroundings, the longer the hall remained warm after the wood had burned out. For them, warmth even shaped the space for people to communicate, forcing everyone to gather closer to the source of energy. When the fire died down, the wall did not lose its warmth. It became its messenger. The accumulated heat flowed back into the room slowly, silently but constantly, like breath that warms the body rather than drying it out. The medieval approach won not by speed, but by inertia. Stone walls could gradually store not only the heat of the day, but also the warmth of people, fires, torches, and everything warm in the space of communication. Even if a crack appeared in the stone, it often did not stop the heating, because the crack did not interrupt the mass, and the mass maintained its function. For several days, a warm wall could be thermal protection rather than a defect. Massiveness was not a miscalculation, it was their strategy against time. It was not a point source of heat, but a source of heat for a huge space. In this test of moisture and cold, the house always won due to its mass, consistency, and distribution of heat through the material itself. Medieval craftsmen understood that the more material was heated, the less external energy would be required in the future cycle. Therefore, they made large initial investments in materials and labor so that they would then spend a minimum on replacing parts. Their system was not complex, it was massive and honest physics. The fire did not only heat the ceiling, it heated objects and people through the walls and the mass of the fireplace. They understood that heat should not travel through layers of plastic and narrow diaphragms, but through a structure capable of accumulating it. A gap or crack in the past could be ventilation or a consequence of time, but it did not become an enemy of function as long as the mass remained. A fireplace heated the surrounding area, while a wall heated for longer. A wall heated for longer, not because stone is better, but because Rome in the Middle Ages knew that it is better not to fight the consequences if the consequences can be resolved through mass and time. And this was not the past. It was their way of not losing to the future. I'm very interested to hear your point of view. What do you think about the fact that progress has made us more dependent and vulnerable in our daily lives? Write about it in the comments. Want to know a secret that will change your perception of the Dark Ages? Many people believe that in the Middle Ages, people warmed themselves exclusively by open fires, burning their faces and freezing their backs. However, the reality was much more complex and technological than Hollywood movies show. Castle architects often built hot air ducts directly into the thickness of the walls. This turned the building itself into a huge heat emitter, working invisibly to the eye. Smoke and hot air from a stove located in the basement or on the first floor rose through a complex system of internal wall passages. While modern engineers are proud of warm floors, medieval craftsmen created warm walls several stories high. This system allowed the upper rooms to be heated without lighting open fires in them and without creating unnecessary dirt. The stones through which the smoke passed were heated to a comfortable temperature, functioning like a huge battery. This approach solved the problem of dampness, which was the main enemy of stone buildings in rainy Europe. A wall heated from the inside always remained dry, which prevented the appearance of mold and the destruction of the mortar. Unlike modern water pipes, which can leak or freeze, smoke channels were invulnerable to frost. Even if the castle was abandoned in winter, the system did not fail and was ready for operation immediately after being lit. Of course, the construction of such hidden communications required the highest skill of masons and precise calculation of draft. A mistaken design could cause smoke to enter the living quarters, turning them into gas chambers. But the craftsmen who passed on their knowledge from generation to generation knew how to control airflows without fans. They used the laws of thermodynamics, forcing hot air to do useful work before releasing it into the chimney. This was an early form of energy recovery, achieved solely by means of masonry. Surprisingly, many of these hidden systems are found by archaeologists in working order hundreds of years later. Where modern air ducts become clogged with dust and require disinfection, stone channels were cleaned by fire and soot. The simplicity of the idea and the monumentality of its execution made this technology unmatched in reliability. But walls were only part of the comfort equation. In the next chapter, you will learn how ordinary fabric saved kings from certain death on freezing nights. What I am about to show you will completely change your understanding of medieval interiors. We are used to thinking of tapestries and canopies as luxury items or purely decorative elements. In fact, they were essential components of a heat conservation system, without which survival in winter would have been impossible. It was physically impossible to heat huge stone halls entirely, so people created rooms within rooms. Tapestries on the walls served as a powerful layer of insulation, blocking the cold coming from the stone. An air gap was created between the wall and the thick fabric, which acted as a thermos and retained heat. Thick woolen curtains on windows and doors blocked the drafts that were inevitable in old buildings. But the main invention was the canopy bed, which was an insulated capsule for sleeping. Thick curtains were closed tightly, retaining the heat of the bodies sleeping inside a small enclosed space. Inside such a fabric room, the temperature could be 10 degrees higher than in the rest of the bedroom. This allowed people to sleep in relative comfort, even when the water in the jug on the table froze. The fabric worked more effectively than any modern heater because it did not generate heat, but masterfully retained it. Carpets on the floors and animal skins served the same function, insulating the feet from the icy stone slabs. Clothing was also part of this multi-layered system. People wore wool, which kept them warm even when wet. There was no concept of loungewear in the modern sense in the castle. Inside, people wore warm, multi-layered clothing. Furniture, upholstery, pillows, and door draft stoppers all served the single purpose of fighting for every calorie of heat. Medieval people did not try to change the climate throughout the castle. They created a microclimate around themselves. It was a strategy of local heating, which is much more energy efficient than trying to heat thousands of cubic meters of air. Modern homes with open floor plans and huge windows are a nightmare from the point of view of a medieval engineer. We have forgotten that the volume of a room directly affects the ability to heat it. Textiles allowed for flexible zoning of space, reducing the heated volume to the size of a bed or armchair by the fireplace. This wisdom became a thing of the past with the advent of cheap fuel and central heating. But are we ready to admit that the old methods were smarter? Don't forget to like this video if you were also impressed by the ingenuity of our ancestors' way of life. And be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new videos.
Crack it tight, lads. We must finish before the snow returns.
Heave! All right, easy now, pull!
Are you ready for the shocking truth about the price of heat? Unlike us, who simply turned the thermostat knob, medieval inhabitants waged a constant war for fuel. Supplying the castle with firewood was a complex logistical operation that kept hundreds of people busy all year round. Wood was not an infinite resource, and the right to cut it was strictly regulated by feudal laws and decrees. Not just any branches were used for heating, but specially harvested and dried hardwood. Oak, beech, and ash were valued for their high burning temperature and long heat output. The use of wet wood was considered wasteful, as most of the energy was spent on evaporating moisture. In addition to firewood, charcoal played a huge role, providing intense heat without smoke or open flames. Its production was a separate industry. Charcoal burners lived in the forests, burning wood in special pits. Charcoal was the ideal fuel for portable braziers, which were placed in living rooms. In treeless areas, peat, dried manure, and even dry seaweed were used. People knew how to extract energy from anything that could burn, showing incredible ingenuity. Saving fuel was not just a desire to save money, but a matter of life and death. Fireplaces were designed to burn fuel as efficiently as possible, reflecting heat into the room. The back wall of the hearth was often covered with a cast iron plate, which protected the masonry and acted as a reflector. Controlling the fire was an art. Servants knew how to stack logs so that they would smolder all night without burning out. Ashes were not thrown away immediately, as they retained heat for a long time and helped to stoke the fire in the morning. Every piece of wood was used to its fullest potential, down to the smallest splinter. Compare this to modern gas boilers, which burn the planet's resources automatically while we sleep. We have lost touch with the source of heat, no longer understanding its true value and the labor involved in obtaining it. The medieval system taught discipline and planning. Firewood for the winter was prepared in the spring. A mistake in calculations or laziness could result in the castle turning into an icy crypt by February. But how exactly did they use this precious heat in their daily lives without burning down the house? In the next chapter, you will learn about the heart of a medieval home that never cooled down.
These walls, but here, by this fire.
Needs more salt, boy. And keep stirring that pot.
Are you ready to learn the truth about why fire in a castle meant more than a sword? The kitchen of a medieval castle was not a back room for servants, but the most important part of the entire building. It was the heart that fed people, warmed the stones, and kept winter at bay. The hearths there were huge, wider than 2 human heights, and the fire in them rarely went out. This was no accident, but part of the castle's logic. Heat should not disappear, it should move on, like the breath of stone and building. The huge hearths were capable of cooking and heating at the same time. Not only meat was roasted in such fireplaces, but also the space around them. The internal temperature of the kitchen was a consequence of continuous cooking, not a separate heating system. The fire could burn and roar for hours because wood was constantly being added. All this warmed not only the hall, but also the ceilings, walls, passageways, and objects. Kitchen walls were designed to be thick, often twice as thick as the exterior walls of a typical house. Inside such walls, air and stone worked together. The temperature there did not fluctuate sharply. It lived by inertia, which was valued more than the speed of heating. If there was a lot of heat, it meant that further heating was possible. If further heating was possible, it meant that the army and the house would not lose to the cold. Metal spits, grates, cauldrons, and hangers were often placed near the kitchen fire, which themselves became part of the heat exchange. The metal heated up, then transferred the heat to the stone and air. The stone absorbed slowly, but retained the heat for a long time. It was a castle that was first heated, then heated people itself. In some castles, the kitchen could occupy almost a quarter of the lower level of the building. It was not decorated, it was a tool. Its shape and location were determined by practicality. If heat could be driven upwards from there, then the kitchen was placed at the bottom. Rome in the Middle Ages agreed on this. The main thing was not elegance, but purpose. The hearths were so powerful that they could be used to cook feasts for hundreds of people. Sometimes a whole bull or boar was roasted on a spit because the size of the task determined the size of the fire. But even the largest fire was not for luxury, but for function and the thermal mass around it. The longer the fire burned, the more heat the stone absorbed. The charge became the heat of the future. The kitchen was often located so that the warm air from it rose to the main halls, above the stairs, or through special shafts and openings. But even where there were no shafts, the inertia of the rising heat worked. It was a prototype of central heating, only without pumps and mechanisms, but through architecture. People back then understood that air always moves upward. This means that heat will also always move upward as long as the fire is alive.
Indeed, the warmth from the hearth makes the meal sweeter.
When the fire died down, the kitchen did not become cold immediately. It remained warm until dawn because the stone absorbed the heat of the day. This smoothed out the difference between night and morning when the frost is particularly severe. There was no romance in this. It was insurance against the darkness of winter. The stone structure worked like a huge warm hand. Part of the kitchen's heat was incidental, but Rome in the Middle Ages knew that incidental did not mean useless. The heat from the kitchen was used to dry clothes, grain, furs, shoes, and even pressed raw materials for future dishes. Bags of biscuits could be dried on railings or on stone floor slabs. This helped to prevent excessive moisture and mold. Servants often slept here because warmth was more important than status. If the kitchen was the warmest place, then that's where you went. In winter, the kitchen was the liveliest and most human place in the castle. It was a hub of activity with conversations, food preparation, and drying materials. In poor homes, the hearth was smaller than in the castle, but the same in terms of the philosophy of autonomy. It was a combination of light, heat, and food that could not be broken because the hearth was always an important part of the home. The whole family gathered around it not out of an excess of romance, but out of an excess of winter. Preserving heat was also a social law. The warmer the hearth, the more people gathered around it. People themselves generated as much heat as the firewood, and this brought them closer together, warmed them up, and united them with the breath of space. Heat became not just a temperature, but a shared resource against winter. The layout of the castle could shift corridors, staircases, and bedrooms so that the chain of heat was not interrupted between the kitchen and the other rooms. Sometimes even the bedrooms of the nobility were built directly above the kitchens or fireplaces so that the walls would not start to fight the cold at night. It was about balancing utility, not coinciding conveniences. They understood that a house is not just what's inside. A house is how it copes with wind and damp. The Romans and medieval builders knew that a house must withstand any weather because any weather will inevitably come. In this story, warmth was measured longer than the fire lasted because stone, man, and air were equally important in the ability to survive the winter. Today we say thermos, they said stone battery. We say dependence, they said self-sufficiency. They built architecture that provided more warmth than was visible. And when another phase of battle or season ended, the house still breathed warmth. But what did the aristocrats do when they had to leave the kitchen and go outside, where the draft and cold once again tested their resilience? Resilience was not a legend of everyday life. Resilience was their form of normality outside the hearth. They moved up the stairs only after making sure that the walls had absorbed the necessary heat and that the servants had bowls and firewood in their hands for the next transition of heat. For the nobility, leaving the kitchen was a strategy of moving between warm nodes, not a walk through cold levels. It was all part of one long equation of life at home. But let's be honest, can we learn again to build in such a way that fire warms stone, stone warms people, and houses serve longer than the fear of winter? Why do old fireplaces work for centuries while modern boilers rot away in 10 years? The answer lies in the materials. The Middle Ages were an era of stone, brick, and cast iron. These materials are inert, resistant to corrosion, and capable of withstanding thousands of heating and cooling cycles. The cast iron plates used to line the hearths did not burn through or deform under the influence of open fire. Stone and brick only hardened over time, becoming stronger from constant heat. The system did not contain thin tubes, rubber gaskets, or plastic joints that age and crack. The mortar for laying the stoves was made according to special recipes, often adding eggs or wool for elasticity. This allowed the structure to breathe during thermal expansion, preventing cracks. Repairability was 100%. Any brick that fell out could be replaced without dismantling the entire wall. Modern heat exchangers are often made non-removable, forcing the entire unit to be replaced at the slightest breakdown. Today, we pay for efficiency and compactness with reliability and service life. The thin walls of modern boilers ensure rapid heat exchange, but they burn out instantly. The medieval system was crude, heavy, and took up a lot of space, but it was indestructible. Time has shown that stone and iron beat plastic and microchips in the long run. We build temporary solutions, while our ancestors built for centuries. Are you ready to learn the truth about medieval energy, which was all around us but we didn't notice? Medieval builders really knew how to work with the sun, even though solar panels were not yet in existence. They observed the path of light daily, from season to season, and built houses so that they first received heat from nature and then shared that heat with people. This approach was born out of observation, not complex mechanisms. It was simple in language but profound in meaning. The house had to cooperate with the light, otherwise it would become weaker than winter. The orientation of the building to the cardinal points was the first and quietest technology that determined the microclimate in a castle or house. The south was always a desirable direction for living because the sun warms stone and wood there the longest. The main halls, bedrooms of the nobility, and common living rooms of peasants and servants often faced the side where there was more light and therefore more warmth. This was fixed at the level of the architect's fundamental thinking. The architect of the past first understood the movement of the sun and winds, and then the movement of stone. The masters of the past did not choose between beauty and practicality because beauty was what survived and continued to provide warmth. The building had to be positioned so that it caught the maximum amount of sun in winter and did not overheat in summer. Therefore, the south side always had more windows and warm rooms, while the north side had fewer openings and more utility rooms. This was their logic for distributing space, which was not discussed aloud because it seemed obvious to everyone. During the day, the stone absorbed the sun's heat because the sun could shine for hours, and the longer it shone, the deeper the heat charge went. At night, the stone mass slowly returned this heat to the hall without drying out the air or creating drafts above people's heads. It was radiant heat, not the heat of a ceiling fan. And so at night, it was warmer in the halls than outside the walls, where the winter wind was the master of nature. The window openings were small on the outside but wide on the inside, because it was not only the opening that was important, but also the path of the sun's rays deep into the room. The wide slopes directed the light like heat traps that transferred energy directly to the masonry and wooden panels around the frame. Even the wood became warm if the ray lingered on it. The window was not a hole. The The window was a corridor of energy. At night, the windows were closed with solid wood shutters, and this was always done because they knew that the night should not compete with the heat accumulated during the day. The shutter was a protection from the wind and cold, but it did not disturb the balance of the wall itself because a warm air pocket remained between the shutter and the frame. It was a simple method of creating quiet warmth without unnecessary expenditure of firewood and time. The air in the pocket was warmed by the wall and the heat of the person who lived there. Even the choice of stone for cladding could be based on its ability to absorb light and accumulate heat. In some regions, it was known that dark stone warms more than light stone and heats up faster from the sun. But faster did not mean worse, because dark stone also retained its mass charge. Where it was possible to extract a denser mineral, that mineral was used for the walls. Where the stone was dark, the heat was slightly more noticeable during the day. The north had always been a buffer, and although the word was not used at the time, the principle was understood. The rooms there were used for storerooms, staircases, barns, storage rooms, and sometimes for craftsmen, because practical people also warmed the air with their work, not their status. Status was the warm south side, winter was the cold north side. Between them stood the distribution engineering. Corridors and staircases in castles often served not only to connect rooms, but also to connect heat flows. If a corridor ran up along the south wall, it was part of the winter movement of people from warmth to warmth, not arguing with the temperature. Even staircases and galleries could have warmer and colder areas, depending on the time of day and the direction of the sun. This determined the movement of the inhabitants. In the late Middle Ages, winter gardens and glassed-in galleries appeared, which resembled the prototype of greenhouses for people rather than plants. Warm air from the sun and from the nearby kitchen, if it was close by, accumulated in them. People valued these spaces, especially for short daytime breaks in winter, when the sun was at its most beautiful, charging the stone. The heat there became more stable in its equal mass. The landscape around the castle was also determined by its usefulness, and its usefulness was determined by knowledge of wind patterns in the region. Castles were built where hills or forests blocked the path of the prevailing cold winds from the north or east. The forest was not a decoration. It was a pressure wall that did not need to be repaired. It worked as a free shield from wind and snow. Snow respected the forest, and the forest respected the castle. Often, trees on the north side of castles were preserved or deliberately left uncut, especially evergreen species or dense coniferous areas if they grew in the region. Deciduous trees on the south side, on the contrary, let the sun through in winter when the leaves fell and provided shade in summer. It was an engineering agreement with nature to close the house from the sun in summer and open it in winter. And this agreement was part of architectural thinking, which later became a beautiful story in stone. Shingles or tiles were laid on the roof so that they could always be replaced if the storm was stronger than expected. But the roof also became part of the heat exchange if there was a warm attic or an earthen layer under the roof slab, which smoothed out the differences. It was a network of invisible heat conservation. Medieval architects always took into account that nights would be longer than days in winter and shorter in summer. Therefore, the initial goal was to smooth out temperature fluctuations through the massive materials and the sensible placement of functions on the sides of the building. This did not require electricity or a double mechanism for constant replacement. Buildings were heated not because people wanted it to happen quickly, but because they wanted it to last longer. In a poor house, this principle was repeated on a family scale. If the south wall was warm, it meant that herbs, yarn, wool, and food supplies were dried on it. If a window expanded the path of light, it also expanded the character of the house. They did not waste words on philosophy, they wasted stone and air gap. And stone and air gap returned this with warmth. And now the main question, quiet and honest. Can we once again build a house that absorbs, retains, and releases heat without fighting the rain in the night? Because tomorrow, winter will come again. This was their version of architectural education, which modern builders are increasingly rediscovering, but rarely apply from the ground up. And tell me, What do you think about the fact that we have lost the ability to cooperate with the sun and wind as simply and naturally as people did in the Middle Ages? Write about it in the comments. We have come a long way from cold stones to microprocessors to understand one simple thing. True reliability lies not in the complexity of technology, but in understanding the fundamental laws of nature. Medieval craftsmen did not fight physics, they used it. Mass, inertia, traction, and the sun. Their solutions were heavy and crude, but they worked for centuries, warming generations of people. Today's systems, for all their convenience, are as fragile as glass. Perhaps we should reconsider our view of progress and bring back into our homes some of that stone reliability that we so carelessly discarded. What other household technologies of the past do you think have been undeservedly forgotten? Write the topics you would like to see covered in future issues in the comments. And be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on new investigations into the history of everyday life.